Hi, listeners. I am sitting here with Tieshka Smith, and she's the owner of Truthseeker Astrology. And she was my astrologer last year and really turned me on to astrology. And in fact, I've interwoven astrology into my work because of her. She began her journey into Western astrology with an intensive study with a Philadelphia-based master astrologer. And after several years of self-directed study, she's added tarot to her practice and has activated her dormant intuitive abilities. And she's emerging from her cocoon as an apprentice astrologer, and she's reading charts for family and friends and has really exploded her practice. So she's an intuitive astrologer for humans who really want to grow into who they were designed and destined to be. Tieshka, welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Isha. I'm so glad to be here with you. And hello to your listeners out there in internet land.
Yeah, you talked about you've shared with me your work with a master astrologer, and I really think of you as a master. I think of you as someone who is so deeply engaged in this work and know it so very well. And I really appreciate that.
No, I appreciate your words. I mean, I'm very touched to hear that. It's interesting because I'm having a secondary progressed measurement as we speak that speaks to mastery and wisdom. And when I saw that, I was looking at my not solar return, but secondary progressed measurements going into 2022. And I saw that, I was like, holy crap, I made it. I think. So to hear that resonates with me on so many different levels. I got really good rigorous training from someone very near and dear to my heart, and he prepared me very well, very well. Actually, his training was the culmination of, I think, a lifetime of preparation. So I'll just say that before we get into the conversation.
Well, share a little bit about that, because I'm intrigued about what turned you on to astrology and what brought you into the work with this person.
Yeah. So I've always had, over the years, a passing curiosity or interest in sun sign astrology. I remember being a kid and checking the newspaper. Like, I knew I was a Virgo, and I would check the newspaper, after I read it. I'm a voracious reader. So I'd get the newspaper and I would check it, and I'd be like, oh, that sounds maybe right. I don't know. We'll see. And religiously, I would check it like every day or every other day. And so the moment I decided that I needed to go deeper was right around my nodal return. I was about 37, 38 years old. And coming out of a really contentious marriage. And I asked myself, first of all, I don't feel like a Virgo. Like, all the things that they say about Virgos, I feel like there's some inaccuracies here, not understanding the mechanics of sun sign astrology and how those horoscopes are written. Now I get it, actually, because I'm a practicing astrologer and I understand how those are constructed. But in that time, I was like, I don't feel like no Virgo. This is not Virgo energy. It's something else, and I need to understand what that something else is. And I remember I bought a few books and I was reading it, and they just weren't satisfying my curiosity. They weren't quenching my need to know. And that's my moon in Sagittarius, right? It's just, I needed to know and understand and go deeper. And so I remember the day. It's October 15, 2008. And I had decided, number one, I was done with my marriage in my head, right? And that began a whole long process of ending that chapter. And then number two, I was like, why do I keep making these bad decisions? as they relate to
Mm.
relationships. Why do I keep making these bad decisions? And that's, you know, and they say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Absolutely.
And that is when I met my teacher and began my journey into astrology. And he and I have a relationship. So we've been together for almost 12 years now. But he's been an excellent teacher. He has taught at the university level. He's written and he's done a lot of consulting and counseling himself. And so he started me on this rigorous program. He's like, the way that you learn astrology is to cast charts. and, and every day I was casting a new chart. And it's like opening a gift. Every day you enter in that data into your astrology program, you open that chart, that horoscope wheel, and it's like a gift. And I'm getting a chance to delve into someone else's deepest desires, deepest wants, deepest needs, fears, the whole gamut.
Yeah.
So I did that for like, I don't know, it was like 3-4 years. I'm just casting charts. And you had me, you know, reading a lot of books. So when I say self-directed intensive, it was very intensive and it was very self-directed. By that time I had a master's degree, you know, so I knew how to kind of structure my work and, you know, get into the books and get into the casting of charts. And we would talk about things and he would help me write in the way that astrologers write up interpretations and analyses and things like that. So he was preparing me for one day becoming a practicing working astrologer. I didn't know this at the time. I was just like, oh, this is what this means, you know, looking at my own horoscope and then being able to see other patterns in other people's natal
Yeah.
horoscopes. It enlightened me, it illuminated my understanding, it expanded my awareness, and it caused me to go through a serious transformation. At the time, transit Pluto was in Sagittarius, so it was lighting up all the mutable points in my chart. Deep
Mm.
seismic change, and I had to either, excuse me, I had to evolve or die. And I
Wow.
literally was in a place where my health was bad. I was severely overweight, stressed out, and in a quandary about who I was.
Yeah.
And astrology, I tell people that astrology literally saved my life, literally saved my life. So I take this very seriously. I take my practice very seriously. I take my clients and their concerns very seriously. Some of them have become my friends, my dear friends, and I learn from them.
Hmm.
And they teach me things on the path on my own journey. And I'm so very grateful to have been given this opportunity to help people through this medium. So yeah, it was a bad marriage, plus me doing some serious self introspection, asking some really hard questions, and having this tool available to me to really just help me understand a deeper sense of self.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And from the work that you and I have done together, that's really how you approach astrology. It's really about this deep excavation and growth and evolution. It's an evolutionary process for you. At least that's, like the questions that you ask are about, like, you work through shadow, right? You work through like um aspects of the personality that need to be let go of and opening in this other direction. And you know and it includes relationships with people,
Yes,
relationship with self, relationship with money, all of these facets,
exactly.
intuition, etc.
Yeah. You know, the things that you just laid out are, when I hear terms like letting go, when I hear terms like evolve, when I hear terms of change, these are all representations of archetypes. And so when I think of those terms, I can immediately think of Uranus, or I can immediately think of Neptune, or I can immediately think of Pluto. I can think of Saturn. and work my way backwards. My teacher always, he taught me, start with the heavy outer planets first and then work your way in, because that's where the real change happens. That's where the real tests, refine us and make us into who we need to become. And he's right. Like, people always talk about Mercury retrograde. And I'm like, that's not where the business is happening, y'all. That's not where the business is happening. These are minor frustrations compared to a Pluto transit to your moon or to your sun or to your midheaven. This is, Mercury retrograding. Yeah, maybe your phone stopped working and you got to go get a new one. But really, Pluto is going to determine how you handle that minor inconvenience. Right?
Yeah.
Or Uranus is going to enlighten you around your relationship to that technology, because Uranus rules technology. Neptune is going to dissolve perhaps your relationship. Maybe that relationship to your phone is unhealthy. And maybe that phone stopped working, not because it's Mercury retrograde, but because you have an unhealthy attachment to your phone. And then you work backwards, and then that's how you have conversations. And that's, in my practice, I feel like starting with those heavy outer planets. There's an astrologer who wrote a book called The Gods of Change, and Pluto going back to Uranus and Neptune and Saturn to some extent. These are the gods of change. That's where the real change happens. And oftentimes we can accept what's going on because it's being mirrored back to us through our relationships. So everything you said about relationships to ourselves, and then branching out from there, our family, our children, our work, these are all sort of encapsulated in each house of the horoscope. So then when I'm thinking about the outer planets and change, I'm like, where is this change happening? Is it happening in your relationship to self? Is it a first house matter, or is it a sixth house matter and your coworkers are driving you crazy?
Right.
Or is it money? Is it an 8th house thing? Is it an 11th house thing where your friends are, just rallying around you because of a loss? That's, being able to kind of read the map and then kind of throw those questions out to people helps them to reflect. I'm not here to tell anyone how to do it, what to do. I just say, this is what I see. And let's talk about it. Let's see how it resonates in your everyday life. And I think that's where the growth happens, giving it back to the client to, do that inner work.
Yeah.
I'm just there to help them. I'm a guide. I'm I'm taking you by the hand, leading you through the process that we all know we have to go through. We all know deep down inside intuitively, yeah, I know I need to work this stuff out.
Yeah. And there were, just for the listeners, I just want to share part of last year and how your work supported me in it, because, we had a reading in December of, was it 2019? Yep. We had a reading in December of 2019. And then you called me in April of 2020, right?
Yeah.
Like just, when the pandemic or when the lockdown began.
Yeah.
And you were basically like, okay, like, Isha, let's sit down and talk. And let me do your chart. Let me tell you what's coming.
Yeah.
And it was like, I felt so grateful for that, because it's like, you called me, you saw some things, and you were like, let me forewarn you. And that reading supported me through the rest of the pandemic in a way that, like, you don't even know. And I'm letting you know now. Because, shortly after our reading, George Floyd was murdered, and you had told me very clearly, you're going to be deciding like what groups you're going to be involved in. You were going to be like, your community is going to be shifting. And like, yes, there were separations, there were groups coming together, and there was a whole bunch of shifting in my relationships that, if I hadn't had some sort of warning around, would have ungrounded me. And it was hard enough as it was, but knowing that, okay, this is the task at hand. All right, I can stay, I can wrangle with this. And then even later, you shared something about tree wisdom.
Oh yeah.
And I remember being like, what the hell is that? And a tree fell on my
Yeah,
house.
I remember you
You know what I
telling me
mean?
that.
It's just like, and those experiences just got me like, it was just so clear that there was something here. And I always believed in astrology, but it's like, it became so real life for me that I just held on to that reading
Mhm.
just as a way of like grounding and just like being able to continue showing up for this inner work and
Right.
showing up from a place of like acceptance and being like, okay, well, this is the task. All
Yeah.
right, how can I show up for it and be as present as possible and be as like co-creative as possible, and
Mhm.
letting whatever's happening in the cosmos alchemize, right? And
Yes,
churn out like whatever is needing to move
that's
and
right.
yeah, evolve and grow and open.
I
Yeah.
love that. And then also knowing that, astrology is the study of cycles, planetary cycles that correspond to what's happening on Earth right now in our lives.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get swept away by our circumstances. They're so overwhelming. And even with the best practice of grounding and staying present and being aware and being loving and gracious and full of gratitude, there's always something. There's a kernel of doubt, there's a kernel of uncertainty. Is this going to ever end?
Yeah.
It's always like, you know obviously with the good things, you don't ever want them to end, but everything has an end point.
Yeah.
And at the end point, when the smoke clears, it's about understanding what was it that I needed to learn
Yes.
about this cycle that I went through. What did I need to learn, and what can I take with me to, going forward in my journey, whatever journey that is for all of us, and deciding this is something that I can put in my toolbox and and use, or help someone else with my story of going through that cycle and feeling all the feelings and being challenged and being pushed to grow, and understanding that eventually it comes to an end. It comes to an end. It's either a ending that feels like a sigh of relief. It can be an ending that marks loss and grief and sadness, or it can be an ending that marks a great deal of celebration and accomplishment. It just depends on the archetypes that are at play. But the beauty of astrology is what you said, the idea that if I have just a tad bit of awareness of what's going on, I can reorient myself to these circumstances and choose to be present and choose to be mindful and choose to be open to what it is I'm supposed to understand and learn about myself. So when I hear, your testimony, it's like, I did my job.
Yeah.
And that gives me a great sense of fulfillment. I'm a Virgo. I got a stellium of planets in Virgo. So for me, I'm all about doing the job. I want to show up and do my job, and I want to do it well. I want to do it well.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. And when you talk about archetypes, I work with archetypes, but you're not talking about Jungian archetypes. Are you talking about planetary archetypes?
Well, Jung studied astrology. So, oh yeah, he was a student of astrology. And a lot of his thinking informs many Western astrologers in their work and their philosophy on, archetypes, planetary archetypes, cycles, and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of there's that connectivity there between us. And I know that you're a practicing clinician. So here's the thing that people don't know about me. Before I became an astrologer, and even before I became a photographer, because that's also another thing. I'm a photographer. I spent most of my career working in behavioral health. So I was around like clinical psychologists, licensed clinical social workers, LPCs, the whole nine. I'm watching them and had no idea that they were teaching me, that they were teaching me how to counsel and how to be present. Like I had no idea that I was learning this in the early 2000s. Like, oh, this is going to be helpful. And so, bringing it all forward is like, yeah, I study a lot of Jung and all the other psychologists and therapists and all that stuff, because it helps me, it helps add a layer of professionalism to my practice. It was funny, I won't put anybody out there, but I had a new client come to me and they were like, yeah, I don't know about this astrology stuff. I had this reading with this person and they came out and they were doing all this woo-woo stuff and they had a pot of collard greens going on in the back and they kept interrupting and saying, oh, I got to go check on my greens. I got to go check on my children. I got to go do this. And I was just like, well, that's not me. I approach this as a profession. I try to show up as a professional. And I respect people's time, and I want to convey that this is something that people should take seriously. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years of knowledge and tradition. And when I show up, I want to represent that to the best of my ability. So yeah, archetypes I can talk about, and I love them. I respect them because that's how we understand at a very subconscious level.
Yes.
What's happening. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So you bring in all of these elements, right? The archetypes, and then there was these images. I forgot what they were called.
Symbols.
The Sabian symbols. Yes.
Yeah. And when we talk, you mentioned tree wisdom. That was actually a reference or a nod to one of the Sabian symbols. I always love to open my sessions discussing what the real meat of the session is going to be about, because people show up and say, oh, I want to talk about money, oh, I want to talk about this, and then I consult the Sabian symbol of the moment we come together.
Yes.
And it gives me a deeper level of insight. I'm like, yeah, I respect what you're saying, but maybe we can go here too with your permission, you know what I mean? And then it opens up a whole dimension of discovery, both between myself and the person that I'm working with. We're taking that journey together.
Yes, because that Sabian symbol provides the frame for that whole reading.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And it gets to me the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
Sometimes our subconscious plays tricks on us, right?
Yeah.
We think it's the thing, and it really is not that thing. It's the thing to the left or the right or above or below.
Yeah.
And the Sabian symbol will say, yeah, but maybe it's about tree wisdom. What?
Yeah. And the Sabian symbol, it really does speak at a subconscious level, because even as I was remembering the reading, it's the Sabian symbols that would come up and serve as a reminder. Even I remember you having talked about like flying and being led by intuition. And the tree symbol, and there were some other symbols that just sort of like guided me along the way and were be like, oh yeah, that's what's happening right now. And not necessarily like, oh, where in what house is like is this thing happening. But the Sabian symbols really do speak, like, because they're images and our intuition operates often in images.
That's right.
It really just speaks that same language. And so you without even being aware of it, like you tap into the energy body, you tap into, right, this deeper collective peace.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's another thing that I've appreciated about your particular approach, because I've been I've been counseled by other astrologers, but you bring in this personal evolutionary piece also with what's happening in the collective. Like, what is the bigger, what is the bigger issue, or what is the bigger task happening on the humanity collective level? So can you speak a little bit about that?
I can. So bringing it back to my natal chart, I have Chiron in the 10th house in a pretty, well, astrologers call it a mystic rectangle aspect. But for those who don't care about that jargon, it's in aspect to my moon, my Saturn, and my Uranus. And because it's the highest body in my chart, I'm called to kind of channel, if you understand the archetype of Chiron mediates between, our lived experience, Saturn, and the great beyond. So I feel like that energy literally manifests through me on behalf of, of the collective, that I can kind of channel and tap into what's going on and what's coming down the pike from out there. It may not be fully formed, but I have the ability to not only intuit it, but create containers of conversation and awareness to discuss these big topics and bring them down to earth. And that's a gift that I did not understand before becoming aware of it. I remember having my chart cast, and in some programs you have to actually elect to bring in, asteroids and other bodies. And so I brought in Chiron and some other things. I'm like, what is this key thing at the top? And I could never get a straight answer from people. What is this thing? Is this making all these lines to all this other stuff? What is going on? And Chiron, the glyph for Chiron is a key. And it literally, understanding Chiron unlocked so much for me. And it explained like my orientation to, bringing in my moon and Sagittarius energy, bringing in Saturn and Gemini, to create these containers where these mature discussions can take place about what's going on. And Saturn is in my 11th house. And then also bringing in my 4th house Uranus. This sort of deeply felt, I don't know, it's hard to explain what Uranus in the 4th house is, other than it's like I can see things and I can feel things that just that happen at such a private level. And then I have these other tools to kind of bring them up to the top of my chart and come out and make sense to other people.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's been the key that helps me unlock my understanding of what the universe is bringing into the collective awareness.
Could you
Chiron.
could you speak a little bit more about Chiron? Because, I have a lot of Chiron chironic energy, and the people that I work with are, I feel like a lot of them are the wounded, are in the wounded healer archetype, or work with it, or wrangle with it in their own chart. So I would love for you to offer a little bit more depth there about like what it means, what it unlocks.
Well, I think depending on who you ask, Chiron represents a wounding that is so deep, that speaks to abandonment issues. It speaks to being different. But for me, Chiron represents an awareness of the great beyond that can be channeled into everyday experience. And whether or not that helps other people, it really depends on the person, because sometimes our woundedness can get in the way of being open and aware of what we need to do to help other people.
Sure.
To be able to speak from that place of hurt and abandonment. And it's really one of those things that, I've studied it. I've read a lot of books about Chiron, but personally speaking, Chiron to me represents a depth of sensitivity and awareness of not just what's coming in from the universe in terms of messages and energy, but how to channel that in a way that gets people thinking outside of their own hurt. Because we take our hurt and it can sit in our bodies, and it can sit in our minds and our spirits, and we can kind of like create these containers around it, and no one can get to it.
Yeah.
And what chironic individuals have the capacity to do, whether or not they unlock it, is up to them. But they can take that hurt and work with people to kind of ease it and massage it, and give each other permission to kind of release it and let it go. Chiron was a teacher. He was an astrologer. He was a healer. I mean, he worked with medicine and herbs. He mentored, and he was a warrior too. So, so all these things I try to honor in my work. I try to honor them in that Chiron is not just about being wounded. It's not about feeling sorry for yourself. It's about taking that hurt, understanding it, having some forgiveness for whomever or whatever, hurt you, and channeling that into something that, activating it in a way that people can see it and say, I can do that too. I can heal from that thing that happened to me. If she did it or he did it or they did it, I can do it too. I'm not, it doesn't take, mystic abilities to be able to be, to embody Chiron.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing that in, the piece around taking whatever wound and not staying in our woundology, but alchemizing the wound into the gift that we then serve with, right? Or that we support other people through.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And that means you got to get ego out of the way, because ego tends to distort the calling. It's like, well, I got to help other people. Nobody helped me with my wound. I dealt with that for a long time. And even now, sometimes a little bit of that comes up and I had to sit with it, feel it, and say, okay, what's this about? Let me work with that. But getting the ego out of the way so that you can work with other people through their own wounding. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of bravery. It takes a lot of courage. Because a lot of times you may not get that pat on the back. You may not get that acknowledgement. But if you're keenly aware of what's going on and how you're supporting someone else and you're seeing the changes in them, that should be that's the reward. I mean, Chiron sacrificed himself for the collective. If you think about the myth of it, right? So a lot of what Chironic individuals do is sacrifice. So that's the complete, total polar opposite of ego.
And it's not sacrifice from the place of like extracting from oneself, or like basically like pulling energy from yourself to serve other people and depleting yourself in the process, but it's about sacrificing the ego, sacrificing the part that says, yeah, I'm the one, or I'm like being in some sense of heroicism.
Yes, that's right.
It is about sacrificing the ego, not sacrificing the true self.
That's right.
Yes, I want to make that distinction. It's really important because we do, people can get into some self-sacrificial.
That's right.
Behavior, language, energy, and to really like, let's tease out what we mean by sacrifice. It's sacrificing the ego, the part that wants to take a bite out of that and said, oh yeah, I did this.
That's right. That is right. And those of us with Chiron and Aries natally, we're all going through our Chiron return. So if you're between the age of 49 and 50, you've either had it or you're about to have it. So it's really about how well have you gotten your ego out of the way to, activate your own personal Chiron and helping other people. Because in Aries, Chiron can tilt to be, pretty selfish. And well, what about me? It's like, what about you? I mean, it's a whole generation of us who are going, what about me? You can see this play out online. What about me? What about my feelings? What about and it's like, no, this is deeper than what about me?
The
the identity that forms in the midst of the Chiron return is really more about legacy building. It's about thinking about what you're going to leave behind, and not a lot of hurt feelings. Hopefully, you're not hurting people in the wake of you doing this healing. You're bringing in Libran energy. You're finding support from other people. You're learning how to relate to other people a little bit better, hopefully, in that journey. And you're hopefully engaging in some pretty deep soul level healing. Listening for messages from wherever you get them from, and asking yourself, how is this going to help the people that I'm supporting and possibly leaving behind? Because that, really the thought should be shifting to legacy building. What am I creating for, for the people that I care about and love and want to support?
Yeah. And just like, you also talk, Chiron, it seems, is sensitive to what's happening sort of in the bigger field, in the collective field.
Mm-hmm.
And you've also talked about that individuals also need to begin sort of moving into more of a collective way of thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like, generally speaking, getting out of their personal narratives and stories and focus, and beginning to open up into a more like a bigger awareness.
That's right.
Of like the interrelatedness between themselves and other people, and whether that's energetically or relationally or both. And so maybe just share a little bit about like how that piece comes into your work.
Yeah. It's interesting because last Thursday I channeled some stuff about Pluto in Aquarius, which happens in 2024, but we're going to get a preview of that. Let me just look at my notes here. In early 2023, when he dips his toe into Aquarius and then comes out and dips back into Capricorn for a minute before he transitions into Aquarius for good. And that happens, like I said, early 2024. And what I channeled was this, and I hope you don't mind me using a little bit of profanity, but this is what came up.
Do it.
Handle your shit. So as we sharpen our awareness, as we make an effort to build bridges between our individual selves, creating this sort of network of community that addresses a lot of tough social issues, right? Here's the thing, the collective is not going to be in a position come 2024 to carry people who have not done the work, the individual work. That's
You've been warned. You've been warned.
So what I also wrote down was that 2022 is going to be a year of transition as Pluto eases out of Capricorn and inches closer and closer towards the end of Capricorn. This is really going to be about accepting responsibility, assuming responsibility, and acclimating oneself to a new pace, because once Pluto goes into Aquarius, things are going to speed up. Think about it. Aquarius is the home sign of Uranus, where things happen like that.
Quantum.
Yes. So if you are not on that level, you got some time to get ready. I'm just saying, you got a couple years. Work on your pace, people. Let's go. If you've been putting off seeing a therapist or putting off seeing a healer, whether that's healer of your body, of your spirit, of your mind, now's the time to get to that work. It's time. You can't sit around and twiddle your thumbs and lean on your social supports to do the work for you. Mm-hmm. Because what we're going to enter once Pluto enters Aquarius is a rapid acceleration of people coming together to attend to some major shit. Wow. And we're not going to have time to support, my mother or my family, and nobody got time for that. We're not going to have time to deal with your mother issues or your, daddy issues or,
right.
Your dog, what happened in third grade. We're not going to have time.
It feels so good to hear that from you, Tieshka. You heard it here, listeners. Get your shit together. Call
wherever
me.
Pluto goes, Pluto is about purging. Pluto is about ripping from the body politic what's corrupt, what no longer works. So if you think about Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, the sign of the collective, he's going to be ripping out everything that has been toxic in terms of how we think about and operate collectively.
Wow.
So this idea that, my collective or my community will handle it for me. No, they won't.
Wow.
They won't. Time's up. Because Pluto is going to be doing that collective level work to root out what hasn't been working. So think about technology, the technology
Yes.
that keeps us going at each other's throat. I read what you wrote about the polarization piece, that we're bickering and fighting over beliefs and attitudes that maybe shouldn't even be the things that we're holding on to.
Right.
And if we're not willing to let that go, Pluto's going to come and just say, and you're going to be like, whoa. Well, I told you, you had 2 years. You got 2 years. Get it together. Get it together, because the community has so much serious work yet to do.
Yeah.
We think it's bad now. We've been contending with Pluto going through Capricorn and really showing us the weak spots in our institutions, in our traditions, in the whole idea of power itself, right?
Yes.
And that work is coming to an end. And I think some of us have rolled with it. Some of us are still struggling with it, but we still have some time to kind of reconcile ourselves to the reality of what's going on when we think about Capricornian themes, power, status, institutional wealth, things like that.
Yes.
But once he shifts into Aquarius, this is about the collective itself.
Yeah.
And we've got some work. We've got some really heavy stuff that we're going to have to confront. And we can't do that carrying all this individual toxicity that folks don't want to deal with. So, it's really, I was hoping that I'd get an opening to share that.
Yes. I'm so glad you did, because I think that that's really like an invitation to the listeners to get your shit together. Let's do this. Let's move this energy. Let's get our bodies, minds, spirits ready for this acceleration.
Yeah, it definitely would be an accelerator. Yeah, Pluto and Capricorn, you think about the Capricorn Cancer axis, we're talking about the parental axis, parental themes. And I always used to say, America's got daddy issues and mommy issues. America is a Cancerian nation, and it also has Pluto and Capricorn natally. So as a nation, we're undergoing a Pluto return. So on a macro level, we got to deal with these issues. And on a personal level, we each have to deal with these issues. And that's great. But some of us have been, when we keep looking to the past, it's kind of you can give yourself a little bit of you can rationalize, well, I'll put it off. Well, my parents have died. I don't have to deal with that. No, those issues still cling to us.
Yeah.
And Pluto has been asking us to face them, deal with them, and let the toxic crap go. Because once Pluto goes into Aquarius, we're not going to have time for all that.
Wow, that's a perfect place to end this conversation. And Tieshka, where can people find you? Where can they book a session with you?
Okay. So home base for me is my website, truthseekerastrology.com. From there, there are links to how to book a session online. I have a online booking site through Square. And if you wanted to go directly to that, skip over all the stuff I write on my website, you just want to book a session, you can type in the URL, book Truthseeker Astrology, all one word.com. And then from there, you can go and book. But most of the people, and I love my clients because they always reach out to me and we have this sort of back and forth, and I'm happy to, respond to email inquiries. You can contact me through my website, or you can just email me at truthseekerastrology@gmail.com. If you have questions about, my session offerings, the types of readings I do, my philosophy, and so on and so forth. I have a moon in Sagittarius, so I love dialogue. I love going back and forth.
Yeah.
I do have a Facebook page, which is linked from my website. And I also have an IG, which I post to actively. I do have a Twitter, but I'm kind of like, I don't know, Twitter has got a weird vibe to it when it comes to the metaphysical community. I'm like, I don't know about this. So I I feed stuff to my Twitter, but it's not, I don't actively maintain it.
Okay.
So two places you can find me on social media, Facebook and Instagram. And again, truthseekerastrology.com, or you can email me at truthseekerastrology@gmail.com.
And I'll include all of the links to that in the show notes so that people can just click in and do the
Yes.
thing.
Yes. Thank
Tieshka,
you.
it was such a pleasure and a gift. And I just feel it all. Like I feel the energy in my body just sitting here with you and having this conversation. I feel so activated in all of the best ways. Thank
Oh,
you.
that's wonderful. And the feeling is mutual. I'm so glad that we had a chance to have this conversation, talking about my favorite topics, the outer planets, Chiron. And I just want to congratulate you on doing it. You doing this podcast. Look at you.
Almost a year.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah,
That
getting
is
ready for season 2.
This is
Yeah.
great. Congratulations. I'm
Yeah.
glad to be a part.
Yeah. Thank you, Tieshka.
Thank you.